Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a couple of hours that I'm here, and it feels like, when you take a house plant and put it in the sun for a month, because I'm from Pune, and this is Mumbai's heat. But, I have friends in the evening who are from Hyderabad, that they're going to play with me, and they're going to win this contest any day, because the temperatures over there are crazy. Anyways, a little bit about myself. I'm Rajdeep. I'm an Unreal authorized instructor by day and a technical artist and a real-time 3D developer by night. That's not a sleazy euphemism. That's actually, it's going to resonate with you guys who work with overseas clients. You'll understand, right? So speaking a little bit about the application that has changed my life since for about like 2016 and going forward. And when the nature of your work is such that you're solving problems constantly for companies, because I work with already established Unreal Engine teams for companies, and I work as a contractor for them, either for consultation or to lead those teams to the solutions that they are unable to get from point A to B. You realize that when you're working with an application whose developers are also focused to solve your quality of life, it really brings the enthusiasm in you, and you really want to present what is actually real, right? So, and I'm sure given everyone who's here is from the field, you know the changes that has happened in the real-time 3D industry since Unreal Engine 5 came out, right? But the staggered releases from 5.0 alpha, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 was relatively faster than what it used to be during the Unreal Engine 4 days. But then suddenly there was a little bit of delay between 5.3 and 5.4, and there is a big reason for it. It packs a massive punch. So we're going to go through all of those features, right? To begin with, whatever features I'm going to be talking about has been proven to be working on the field, because Unreal Engine 5.4 is successfully being deployed in the Fortnite Chapter 5, Rocket Racing, Fortnite Festival, and Lego Fortnite as well. So these are not like beta testing or experimental features. These are production ready as of today, right? So you can literally go home, download 5.4, and experience these features for yourself. So there are segments to what I'm going to talk about. There is an animation segment for the game development side of things. There is the final pixel and rendering section. There's the developer section. And then at the end, I'll be talking about some features which slipped right under the radar, because you must have, at least some of you must have seen the State of Unreal GDC talk, right? And you must have seen some of these stuff that I'm going to be talking about. But at the end, you will be hearing about some features that were not talked about as much, right? So I'm sure some of you know about control rig inside Unreal Engine. It's a feature that allows you to, a tool set that allows you to bring your skeletal rig characters, assign controls to them. But the process is lengthy. It does require you to have some understanding of how control rig graph works, right? Now that pain has been alleviated because there's a now modular set of pre-made rigs that you can apply to your bones, and that'll just set up your entire character in a ready to animate fashion, I don't know, in a couple of minutes. There's a quick example of that. And speaking of rigging characters, we were very dependent on DCC, external DCC applications to get the characters ready, skinning them, rigging them, all of that, right? But we have the ability to use Unreal's skeletal mesh editor to skin weigh, rig, as well as use control rig to finally animate the characters. Speaking of character rigs, if you have ever had pain bringing in character rigs which are not part of the Unreal base skeleton or the metahuman base skeleton, you know the pain of transferring or retargeting that, right? That's become a one-click solution now. You bring in any known rigs in the market, like a Mixamo rig or anything like that. It's a one-click transfer. You can either transfer all your animation assets in that way as a complete list of data, or you can just port over the rig and then bring in new animations and apply to the new animation rig. So yeah, this is just an example of the inbuilt skin weight skeletal mesh editor that you can see in action here. So you can literally start, given that Unreal also has the modeling tool set, in theory, or actually in practice, given that I also have done this, you can start modeling in a game engine. There is sculpting tools as well. You can texture as well, and I'll come to that. You can skin weight, rig, and then create a custom rig for your artist to use. So all in all solution right inside the engine. You don't have to step out even for anything. So yes, more details about what changes have happened on the animation front. So you will, once you download 5.4, one of the key things you'll notice that the gizmo has changed a bit, right? Because Unreal's gizmo is pretty recognizable. There used to be this funny post about Embergen, and people used to call it an Unreal Engine video, but it's Embergen, and anybody would recognize it is because of the gizmo. Now that gizmo has changed. So, and that's a very animation-friendly gizmo that you'll find. And layering in control rig has also been introduced. So you can have one animation layer and have an additive weight and have another animation rig layer right underneath it. So you can work in the same way that you would work in any other DCC for animation right inside the engine. So speaking of animation, if you're not into character rigging or animation, you've probably been working in cinematics, and sequencer is your go-to tool, right? So anyone who has used an NLE, like a Premiere situation or an After Effects situation, you know that those softwares have been working on their layer and their, the UI system for a very long time, right? And although sequencer is a big upgrade from what Matney used to be, if anybody didn't know, in Unreal Engine 4 before sequencer came in, there was Matney, right? And then when sequencer came in, it didn't receive that much love as the rest of the engine did for a very long time. Finally, with 5.4, we see a significant improvement in not only the UI, but also like access to certain controls that would otherwise be very common for other DCC applications. So that's a really good quality of life improvement for anybody who continuously works in cinematics. So talking about gameplay, if you have been working in the animation department in a game studio or building your own solo game, procuring animation data and then putting it into state machine and making it so that your character can respond to your inputs and move naturally requires a lot of work, or at least did require a lot of work until now you have motion matching. So all these years we've been using state machine, and it's still available, right? But motion matching makes it so that you take an entire database of a character's animation, right? Left, front, right, jumping, crouching, proning, anything, the complete database, add it to, there's basically 3 assets that you need to create, literally. It looks into that database. You can see the debug. It predicts the motion towards which the input is forcing the character to go, and uses the correct animation. So it's more or less, again, a sort of one-click solution to what used to be like a very rigorous task to do with state machine. So that's, again, a very big improvement. And not just in quality of life terms, but also it makes it very robust in terms of how it uses memory, right? And to prove this, and so that you can test it out yourself, Epic is releasing close to 500 free animations pretty soon that you'll find on the Epic Marketplace. And you can download that, no strings attached, use it, test motion matching out, and give it a go. So moving on to rendering, we have been used to using tessellation in Unreal Engine 4 as a default go-to solution for adding details to any surface that doesn't come with the amount of geometry data that you would otherwise expect, right? And with the release of Unreal Engine 5, that became sort of like a point of contention until it kept improving, and now with 5.4, nanite tessellation is fully enabled. With the addition of 2 CVARs, you can enable a tick box inside your material editor that allows you to have that same node that you used to have in Unreal Engine 4 that lets you put in a displacement map and control it exactly how you used to control, but this time with the benefit of having nanite working in the background, which means, well, you know the benefits of nanite, like crazy amount of polygons, right? And you can see that on the screen. So that's nanite tessellation, 2 CVARs, and this is as easy as it used to be in Unreal Engine 4. And besides tessellation, there are general rendering improvements being made as well. So you'll see a reduction in GPU render times for about 25%, and a render thread time which goes to CPU about 50%, which means right now, if you go back to the same city sample project that was released, I think with the 5.0 promotion, you will see this metric of improvement. The same project running in 5.2 or 5.3 versus running in 5.4. So not just render in terms of cinematic render improvement for the movie render queue, but also real-time render improvement in viewport. So along with that comes the question of temporal super resolution, because we have temporal super resolution built into the engine, and that allows us to not have any kind of external dependency for scaling your scene, right? But that came with a lot of ghosting issues, and it was not really production ready for games as such. Now you'll see temporal resolution does not have ghosting, especially with any kind of motion blur issues that used to have. So that's taken care of. Just give me a sec. Yeah. And this is exactly what I was talking about. So render improvement, not just in terms of your real time, but also your final pixel render improvements as well. The path tracer has received some improvements that lets you do the same amount of samples, but in less amount of time. Speaking of cinematic renders, I'm sure many of you have moved on from the legacy renderer that used to be staple in Unreal Engine 4 after the introduction of movie render queue. But movie render queue had a staggered system of setting up your settings, and then you would save that to a file. That prevented you from making, I would say, a very modular set of presets for your team to constantly use, similar to anything like a blueprint or any similar class-based asset, right? That is taken care of by movie render graph. All of those settings are now nodes. So you can parallelize certain nodes to get the exact same output, but it makes it so that it can be parameterized and then instanced for the same production in so many different variations of the same kind of renders that you would need. For example, the same render would need a different aspect ratio, a different final scaling in terms of resolution. So all of that can be modularized as much as it used to be, but much easier with the movie render graph. So developer iterations. This is something that I can't talk in depth about. You'll have to read up on it, and I'll have the link for you at the end of the talk as well. If you have ever worked with Perforce and a multifaceted team across different physical locations, you must have had issues with cache and cache not working together with the other team members' caches, right? That is being solved by self-hosted cloud storage system, which is now a shared cache data between multiple users. You can use that right now. There'll be more details on this. This is not something that can be explained so much. And it uses Xen storage, which allows you to have more control over cache writes, so you won't have those kind of conflicts. Now, we all know how long cooking takes if you've ever packaged a project. And multi-process cooking was already introduced with 5, but it has seen a significant improvement with 5.4. You can test that out. It uses way better resources. The resource allocation is much better, and cook times have been reduced crazy in comparison to what was. Easily the star of today's talk, at least for this presentation, is Avalanche. Avalanche used to be the insider build name for what now is motion design in a game engine. Imagine that, right? For a long time, the workflow used to be have a Cinema 4D artist in your team, get the motion design work done, export that as USD, Alembic, whatever you call it, bring it in, input your blueprint data, you make it modular for broadcast use case so that you can change text on the fly, image on the fly, right? But that all was something dependent on your team's capability, whether they are up to figuring their own pipeline for themselves. Now this is a dedicated system. Motion design is a new mode inside Unreal that lets you do insane stuff like this on the fly, like effectors, cloners, animators, and it has its own separate mode, of course, but also an outline. So you get a layer-based system and a timeline like a sequencer, and you're able to manipulate meshes that would otherwise require a good set of artists to figure that out using blueprints. So it's not that it wasn't possible before, but it was tedious. Now it's a separate tool set on its own. You drag in the, if you've used modifiers in blenders, it's very much like that, right? And the application goes beyond your typical, motion graphics use case for broadcast or anything like that. Imagine using ready-to-scale booleans, right? Live booleans, or growing a set of forest on the fly, and having those parameters available per instance of your asset. All of those things now inside a toolset. And not just that, this also brings in support for SVG, which means motion graphics data that would otherwise have to be either created from scratch using math inside the material editor. You can still obviously do that, but you can bring in external graphics data, put it on layers stacked as planes, and you can manipulate them in terms of scale, your radial wipes and stuff like that. Lots of things are possible, and it's part of the main render pipeline. So it's real time as well as you can render these out as well. So moving on to virtual production, we've all used our Apple devices as virtual cams in Unreal, but now the Unreal VCam is available for Android as well. So anyone with an Android device, at least to the current OS, you will be able to use this right now. You can set up VCam and you can explore your own virtual environment like you're holding an actual camera. So it's virtual production ready. And it's possible on a Mac OS as well, right? This extends to ICVFX, the features that were not available before, like depth compensation for different lensing. That's available now. I think that's something you'll be able to see in this slide, if this plays. Yeah, there you go. So this is a quick example. I think the tab that was being used was an Android tab. VR scouting tools are pretty common, but depth of field compensation was something that was recently added, and that's now production ready with 5.4. So moving on. Now I'll be talking about some of the features which you'll probably have heard of, tidbits here and there, but it was not part of the main State of Unreal release or any other kind of marketing. They went straight under the radar, right? So support for Vulkan in Linux and editor stability inside a Linux platform. That's something that you can experience now with 5.4. You can directly bring in native Marvelous Designer and CLO data via USD importer inside Unreal. So you don't have to use Alembic or any other kind of geometric cache if you want to do this. So that's a new support that's been added. Now, another crazy feature that's completely unthinkable otherwise, is texture graph. I'm sure a lot of you have used or at least heard of Substance Designer. Like you make your procedural texture sets, you bring it into Painter, and you create your material, bring that in. Why? Because you want the proceduralism, right? That is in effect inside the engine right now. You can create your own, and by create I mean bake your own textures, like actually create your own texture data right in the engine with the help of math. You do that and combine that with, let's say, Substrate, which is the new material system. The sky's the limit, right? You can see a pattern here. Dependency on external tools to be able to support your creations inside Unreal is now coming to the point where everything is inside the engine itself. Another crazy feature that helped me create some of the stuff that I've been doing for my clients is the support for deferred rendering shadows for heterogeneous volumes. In simple terms, it means that if you've been using external applications like, say, EmberGen to create extremely high fidelity smoke or fire, and you bring it into Unreal, if you were using Lumen up till now, you would not get shadows or global illumination from it. Now you're able to in deferred rendering, because otherwise you would have to use path tracing, right? You can do it real time in the viewport without having to depend on any sample collection like path tracer. And there are much more. Like if I keep talking, probably the rest of the people set up for the talks will have to leave, right? So there's a lot more going on with the engine. They have a product board that keeps you engaged as to what new features are coming. And you can read the release note for 5.4 and just try all of these features out on your own. There's nothing stopping you. Go give it a try. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.